Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings. Dan is back. Dan, we've missed you. It's good to have you back. How's your offseason going?
It's been great. It was good to know that the Bake Burger Dynasty League draft was underway when I didn't know it was underway because I didn't follow good enough attention. You know what? I blame Commissioner Adam. Commissioner Adam has had a really rough offseason. Would you agree with that, Heath?
Well, are you talking about old Adam or new Adam?
Old Adam. The new Adam
had new Adam's already like breaking his own word and rules 2 days into becoming new Adam, which just tells you he's still Adam. On today's show, we are going to talk about some of the off-season news that we've touched on over on FFT, but I really kind of want to dive into this idea of how much do these things that maybe change redraft rankings a little bit or a lot, how much does it matter in Dynasty? Dynasty, the longer game. Which of these news items actually matter for Dynasty? We will also be taking your questions at the end of the show, so go ahead and get those in the chat, and we'll answer as many of those as we can after our second break. But we got a lot to get to, Dan, so I just want to start. We'll start with 3 questions for Dan, and I want to start more generic than specific. We'll get into some specific news items, but we're talking about fantasy football, and it's the middle of June. In a general sense, what type of news do you care about right now?
This is a big one for me because, as we'll get to, I see it in a future question. I don't want to tip it yet, but this is not a time of the year where I'm going to be hyper focusing on the news that we get out of OTAs now. And that includes mandatory mini camps, which are going underway this week for a lot of teams. Now, the reason I say that, Heath, is because before doing this job, I was working for 24/7 Sports. I was covering the Giants, and I was lucky enough to get media access for a few of the off seasons. So I got a chance to see OTAs, minicamp, and then training camp. And what OTAs and minicamp are, I don't think a lot of fans really know what is going on during them. It's 7-on-7 periods with no pads. And in reality, it doesn't translate. So if your quarterback is 12 of 13 in OTAs with 4 TDs versus a quarterback that's 6 of 12 in OTAs with no TDs and 2 interceptions, it means almost nothing in relation to what will happen. This time of the year, what's important to me, Heath, is these players are familiarizing themselves with the offensive concepts that these coaches want to run. And so I want to see who's getting run with what teams. For example, and we'll get to in a little bit, if a quarterback is playing reps with the first or second team when the expectation was during OTAs he would at best be playing with the third team, that means something to me. If a wide receiver is getting run with the first team that wasn't expected to get run with the first team in OTAs, that means something to me too, because there's a carryover effect into training camp. But ultimately, where I'm going to learn the most and where I think we're going to learn the most is during training camp practice, specifically the joint practices that these teams do now.
Excellent answer to get things started. Let's zoom in now on the Giants. I don't have any Giants news below, but you're a guy who had strong opinions about the Giants and always does. Has anything that's happened in the month of June changed any of your Giants fantasy priors?
So this goes along with what we were just talking about, because there was like a MLF football account or one of those types of accounts that said like, oh my God, Giants fans should be freaking out. How could they take Jackson Dart, who's having a horrible camp, over Shedeur Sanders? And I'm like, how could you care about what's going on in these OTAs and think that it matter? Ultimately, the actual tangible evidence we can take away, which is a good sign for Jackson Dart, for example, is that he's been taking the second team reps over Jameis Winston so far in OTAs. I did not expect that to happen. I thought that might happen at some point in training camp. But what that tells me is, if you're thinking about it from a dynasty standpoint and from a redraft standpoint in 2QB Superflex leagues, he could be the second man up this year. And we'll see that if that carries over into training camp. The other thing to take away from a Giants standpoint has been Jalen Hyatt's involvement so far with the first team offense. Russell Wilson has gone out of his way to work with Jalen Hyatt. Russell Wilson had 2 offseason workouts, one with all the Giants receivers, the second one, a private workout with Jalen Hyatt, which was surprising. And he's talked about Hyatt in just about every presser. He's hit him on a bunch of deep balls so far in OTAs. Again, I just said, let's not take away from the plays at OTAs, but let's take away from the fact that Hyatt is getting some burn with the first team offense. Of course, Malik Neighbors has a toe injury and is not playing in OTAs. That's probably playing a big factor. But we've seen in the past Russell Wilson work with some fringe wide receivers who are just specialists from a deep ball standpoint and get some production. Calvin Austin last year had a decent amount of production. I think it was like 543 yards, maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns with Russell Wilson. So kind of that role is what I expect for Jalen Hyatt this year, but it puts him on the radar. It gives him some best ball appeal and just someone in Dynasty you might not want to cut.
Let's get to question number 3. You mentioned the Baked Burger Dynasty League. You and I are both in that league. You have a true contender pushing to win a championship after you disappointedly lost in the semifinals last year. I am attempting to transition from rebuilding to competing, but probably a year away. So if I offered you Jonathan Taylor and Nico Collins, I know you really like Nico Collins, for Breece Hall and JSN, how many firsts could I get in that deal?
I saw this in the rundown, Heath. I don't like one, maybe. Like I don't look at it the same way you look at it. Jonathan Taylor versus Breece Hall, for example. I'm not looking to sell Breece Hall right now from a sell low standpoint. And Jonathan Taylor is considerably older than Breece Hall, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just make sure I'm not wrong on that before I move forward. No, he's not. Jonathan Taylor is still somehow 26 years old. That seems
here's the way I was thinking of it is that if you were putting together rankings for this year, I assume that you're going to draft Jonathan Taylor a round or 2 higher in redraft than you are Breece Hall. And I would assume you're going to draft Nico Collins a round or 2 earlier than you are JSN.
Maybe around, right? Like JSN comes up quick after that Collins tier. Yeah. I agree he's a tier lower, though. So I think I'm getting a definite tier upgrade at wide receiver. It's the running back part that gives me a little bit more pause, but I guess I'm still holding on hope for Breece Hall that maybe I shouldn't be holding hope for. So I think it's fair to ask for picks. I don't think I would give up more than a 1 at most in that type of deal.
One first round pick, maybe a first and a second.
Maybe
a first and a second.
Maybe. I traded Tyreek Hill for a first and a second in another league 2 years ago. So I mean,
and you traded a first last year for Cooper Kupp and Travis Kelce.
Was a horrible trade. It wasn't Kupp, it was James Conner. But thank you very much. But it's still bad.
Yeah. So that's the Baked Burger Dynasty League trade update.
That's 1-0 Heath in our trade so far.
Dan may have a trade offer in his inbox after this short
Take a
break.
Look at how many ones he wants.
We are back. We're going to get into the news, and I'm combining 3 pieces of news here. This is going to be a little bit longer discussion for this first question because Nick Chubb signs with the Houston Texans, joins Joe Nixon there. J.K. Dobbins signs with the Denver Broncos, joins RJ Harvey and 17 other running backs there. Those 2 kind of loomed, I feel like, as a cloud over DeAndre Swift's fantasy value, and neither one of them signs with the Bears. So when you look at these 3, I guess the first thing I would ask you is, let's start with Houston. Does Nick Chubb matter at all to Joe Mixon if Joe Mixon stays healthy?
I think so for sure. If Nick Chubb can get back to Nick Chubb last year, for example, just career lows across the board, yards after contact, forced missed tackle rate, dead last and third to last, respectively. I mean, that's just unexpected for a player like Nick Chubb. I think he averaged 3.3 yards per carry, if I'm not mistaken, which was by far his career low. But that's not the player I expect Nick Chubb to be. Now, Nick Chubb could be done. It could be the injuries have taken a toll, and he is that player now. We've seen that with some backs at some point in their career. But I think a year removed from the injury, we could get back to some version of Nick Chubb that we had. And I wonder if he's also a really good fit for this blocking scheme that Houston is running. And from what I've heard, they've gone away from Slowick, which was a pure outside zone Shanahan type scheme. And they're going to be moving toward like the McDaniels scheme, that type of scheme, which is more power gap blocking, which is something that intrigues me with a player like Nick Chubb. The reason I liked Mixon last year so much for redraft was because he was moving to outside zone. And I felt like he was in the wrong blocking scheme in Cincinnati and he was in the perfect scheme in Houston. If they're moving away from that, I don't think it fits Mixon as well. He's in a walking boot. I don't want to make too much of that. I don't think it's a huge deal, but I think it impacts his value greatly. Mixon's somebody I moved down my board for sure.
Okay. So I did not, I'm kind of on the other side of that one. And It's really just more of a philosophical thing. I've said it with the wide receivers a lot. If an older player shows you there's drop off, believe them.
Okay.
Nick Chubb's going to turn 30 in December. He just had the worst year of his career. He's played 10 football games since 2022. I find it unlikely that he's going to return back into Nick Chubb, but he could. And if he does, it probably does matter for Mixon. The second one, When you look at J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvey, I was considerably lower on Harvey before this news. Everybody else had kind of boosted him up into, it almost felt like the old Mike Davis trap. Well, there's nobody else there. He's clearly going to be a workhorse. Dobbins signs another guy who struggled with injuries like Chubb, but when he was healthy last year, looked much better than Chubb, if not as good as what Dobbins and Chubb used to be. How much did this matter to you from a dynasty perspective for RJ Harvey's value? And do you think that Dobbins could have any like actual use this year with Harvey healthy?
Dynasty wise, it doesn't impact me as much. I think from a dynasty standpoint, this will be kind of a 1-year thing with Dobbins, but they could ultimately, which would concern us, kind of move forward with other backs that they keep cycling in through the free agency. This is the thing. Sean Payton values backs, having multiple backs that he believes are quality players he can get on the field highly. So I think you had to really rein it in when it came to Harvey and understand that you're talking about a 24-year-old prospect who is in a situation that is going to be good for his fantasy value, but you can't expect him to ever be a workhorse, in my opinion, at least. Like, there's been rare cases throughout Payton's tenure, and it's been kind of those special players like an Alvin Kamara type who, you know, Harvey at his best could be that type, but I don't think will ever be what Kamara is in the passing game. So it's kind of, there's that ceiling. But what I think it really hurts for me is Harvey was doing a lot of passing work, and he was supposedly doing really well in OTAs, according to Sean Payton. But that's an area I thought J.K. Dobbins was really strong in last year, specifically pass protection. And if they trust him to do that, now when it comes to Harvey, I'm looking at a situation where, well, I'm not sold he's going to be the red zone back. I'm not sold that Aldrick Esme is going to be nothing. Sean Payton's talked him up. He's a player I've talked about on FFT a bunch, a player I liked a lot coming out of Notre Dame. I thought he was one of my favorite prospects in that range, and I'm not going to give up on him after 1 year. So I think they have 3 quality backs there. So for redraft, this is where I'm most concerned. For dynasty, I think ultimately this could, if you haven't drafted yet, some rookie drafts haven't happened, this could help you. You could get him a little bit later, and he's a really good talent with a really good coach. But for redraft, it scares me.
I think a lot of people who were Harvey backers said the age 24 thing was overblown. I care about that a lot, both in how it relates to the fact that you were older than everybody you were playing against in college and the shorter window that we have before we have to start worrying about your age. And so if Harvey's not just going to be a flex in his rookie year, and then we're looking at a 25-year-old before we ever see, can he be a feature back? It does concern me a little more. The third guy I kind of pulled into this because of my DeAndre Swift streak and always talking about him on every guess.
You love Swift.
Well, I look at this now, and the narrative was, oh, Ben Johnson hates DeAndre Swift. He gave Jamal Williams all those touchdowns, and then he let him go so he could draft Jameer. Well, yeah, obviously you hate somebody because you let him go. Gibbs. But they go through the draft and don't draft a running back until round 7. They have multiple veteran options available that we think could still be impactful in terms of playing NFL football, and they don't bring in any of those guys. Even if you're a doubter of DeAndre Swift at this point, don't you have to look at the situation and think, man, he might just fall into top 50 production?
You look at the situation and you say, what are they telling us, the coaching staff, by given who they've added around him? But this, to me, you brought this one example up earlier, the Mike Davis example. This, to me, feels way more Mike Davis-esque than the RJ Harvey, because RJ Harvey, I think, could be very talented. Swift has kind of proven to us over time he's not a very good running back, in my mind, at least. Go ahead.
So I think there are certainly things, and Ben Johnson's already brought up his vision.
Yeah.
There are things that he's not particularly good at. He's also never had a season in the NFL where he finished outside the top 24.
Yes, and you don't have to buy him at you're right. If it's like that type of play where you're not thinking you're going to get major upside, at least in my mind, I think that's fair. The 1 year he was very good in fantasy was the year we had the most yards created by far on that Philly offensive line. When the offensive line is giving him that kind of push, I think DeAndre Swift can hit one cut and go. It's when that offensive line is not doing that. So to me, it's a question of, do you believe in this Bears offense, right? Do you believe in the offensive line coming together, Ben Johnson bringing this whole thing together fast, or could it look a little bit like it did last year with Caleb Williams struggling, not really seeing things fast, not getting the ball out on time? In that scenario, what am I getting out of Swift? I'm getting a back who may have a lot of volume, maybe, but also isn't on a great offense. That I'm not even sold on the first part about, though, because I think Roschon Johnson is the one that I got my eye on in this backfield. He hasn't got a lot of buzz. There's not a lot of talk about him. And I think at some point this offseason, Heath, I was talking about this with Jacob yesterday. I'm going to do a deep dive on Roschon. I'm going to watch all his snaps from last year. I want to see if the player that I evaluated at Texas, whose film I liked a lot, is still that player. Because if that's the case, Kyle Monunga is a guy I love that at Rutgers, but he's a 6th-round rookie, and I don't think he's going to get on the field a lot this year. If that's the case, Roschon Johnson could be a massive sleeper, for me at least, for fantasy, due to my disbelief in DeAndre Swift as an actual player at this point.
I don't think you have to choose.
You go both. Yeah, they're cheap.
I just hit the wrong comment. Sorry about that, Claire. But I did want to highlight a couple things in the chat. Mr. Popinski says, hit that like button for Heath. Y'all appreciate that. Do it for Dan too. And then I don't know if, you guys know it. You've been in the chat. Dave Richard has been in the chat answering questions.
Love that.
And also hitting the like button. Thank you for being here, Dave. What a guy. What a guy. And he won the contest on FFT earlier. We were trying to guess what your background would be. And I believe Dave guessed correctly. So he probably just wanted to come in here and tell people that he was right about that. Last thing, and you're going to hate this, but I'm going to make you do it anyway.
Can I pull one thing back? Because I thought you made a good point. I didn't get a chance to expand. I think it's really interesting when it comes to Dynasty. So much of the game, I believe, is theoretical value, perceived value versus what actual value is. You brought up a point, like when it comes to Harvey and his age, and what if he's a flex? What does that mean? Just the perfect example of that is think about Tyrone Tracy, right? What rookie could have broken out more from that standpoint, from a value standpoint last year? We head into this year and we're doing Dynasty redrafts. We've done a few with you, Heath. He's not going that high in these because he's 25 or 20. He's getting up there in age. They just drafted another running back over him. And the idea is, what is perceived value right now? If he was a 20, 21-year-old back that was young entering the NFL and had a year like he did last year, it would be such a different asset for you to have on your team. So while people are saying it's overblown that he's 24, Harvey, I get that from the standpoint of can he play in the NFL? But from a dynasty standpoint, that's not the case. Like the value, the perceived value is all that matters.
So this is going to be difficult and you're going to hate me for it, but these three teams, the Texans, the Broncos, the Bears, I want you to rank your 4 favorite running backs in Dynasty.
Texans, Broncos, Bears. Wow. RJ Harvey, number 1 for sure for Dynasty. That one's easy for me. Wow. That gets bad. I think I'm still a bit of a Mixon guy, enough to the point where I would take him over the rest of what's left here. So then I would go Mixon. It gets ugly for me, Heath. Like, I want to consider like if I'm going to go the Mixon route, I should probably just finish it off Swift Dobbins because I'm obviously putting the value in the veterans who give me something now. But I don't have much faith in any of those last two to last. Roschon, again, I want to do a deeper dive before I put him in that mix. So it'd probably be that order, but Harvey would be by far the top one for me.
So I've got, as of right now, and I'll have an update coming next week to the Dynasty rankings, and it may not be the same then when I go through the process, but it'll be really close. Harvey, Mixon, Swift are back to back for me. RB's 21, 22, and 23 in my Dynasty running back rankings. There's not another running back from one of these teams in the top 50 running backs. So it's a big drop off. Roschon would be my next favorite. And I do think he's a good sleeper, but I think that the way Dan just identified that is closer to the way a lot of people feel, which is why I feel like Swift is one of the best Dynasty buys right now, because he's probably going to be a top 24 running back this year. And he's probably not going to cost you more than a mid to late second round pick. In terms of what it costs you in Dynasty. Let's get to the second news. There was no Giants news, but there is Daniel Jones news. He is, according to at least one beat writer, leading the competition in Indianapolis.
How can he
and part of that is because Anthony Richardson has a shoulder injury and is not participating. I hate this in every single way.
Same.
Because when I go through the process and look at what Daniel Jones' career has been as a passer, normally if it's Joe Flacco or if it's Jameis Winston or if it's almost any other competent passer, if Richardson goes down, you say, well, I hate that we don't have Anthony Richardson, but at least all the pass catchers just got better. Now I feel like it's just bad on all counts. So let's start with Richardson. Somebody asked yesterday, and I know I put out on Twitter, X, whatever, that I had a mailbag coming today. The mailbag's written. It's on the site. You should go read it. I like to mix up between the mailbag on here and the mailbag there, because here I can get to more questions. There I can go in more depth. And so there's a little more. But somebody asked, like, is this the last chance to sell Anthony Richardson for anything? And the truth, in my opinion, is the history of Daniel Jones suggests Anthony Richardson's going to get a start at some point this year. And so you should just hold him until it's announced that Richardson's starting, if you've completely given up on him. And then you can probably get something for him. You can't get anything for him right now. Is that the right way to view that?
That is 100% the right way to view that.
Is Daniel Jones good for anybody?
So, yeah, this is the thing. There is one glaring thing that stands out when it comes to this situation of Dan. And by the way, has any player in the history of football at this position fallen into more opportunity while showing less than this player, Daniel Jones? It's really unfathomable. And I think part of it, which really scares me, and then I'll get to what the one player that does stand out, is that he has produced in practices. He's a practice quarterback. It's what's kind of convinced the Giants. Again, he had a great training camp last year. So I think what's frustrating for you, Heath, and me, because we both believe we'd rather see Anthony Richardson running the show for everyone's sake, is that he's probably going to outproduce Richardson, even when Richardson comes back in practice. And, Steichen has said, I want to see consistency. I want to see consistency in practice. He's going to get more of that from Jones than he is from Richardson. But the one player that really glaring stands out, I honestly believe he's probably in my top 3 or top 5 players I would be looking to trade for in Dynasty. It's Josh Downs. And it's Josh Downs because Josh Downs looked unbelievable on tape when I watched him a few times last year for Beyond the Box Score. It's Josh Downs because all the advanced metrics for him stand out like a sore thumb about how he's separating, getting open, and creating. And it's Josh Downs because you put those two things together with the key third thing. Look at the Wan'Dale Robinson years. Look at those targets. Look at the Richie James years with Daniel Jones. Richie James, he had 1 year with Jones. Look at all of these underneath slot targets. And what it comes down to is something Darius Slayton said yesterday during Giants practice. He said, with Russ, it's different. I used to run these go routes and these vertical routes, and it would be like underneath ball, underneath ball, underneath ball. He's like, now the ball's actually coming my way, so I got to give it a little extra juice on these vertical routes. And that's the difference with Jones and the Colts. The ball's not going to go that way in the vertical game. It's going to go underneath all the time in a check down situation. And Josh Downs should be able to really eat. Like in PPR leagues, if you're in a PPR dynasty league, you should be picking up Josh Downs right now. And I think he's somebody who you could look to as a win now player while also being somebody long term who could help your team.
So a lot of those guys you talked about in terms of their years with Daniel Jones, we're still struggling to be consistent wide receiver 3s.
From a fantasy standpoint,
yes, 8 targets a game. But
sure, specifically Wan'Dale and Richie James as well. But I would say you would agree with me, Heath, and the reason I brought it up is that Josh Downs is probably a level higher than those two players.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Does what you said about Josh Downs potentially apply even more so to Tyler Warren?
Maybe. I don't know if I trust Jones to get a tight end involved really all that much. He never has really. There's been no tight ends that have had relevancy with the Giants from a fantasy standpoint under Jones.
Okay. So I'm not very excited about Tyler Warren. So next news item, Jordan Addison has a July 15th trial date for his DUI. Now, I think it seems like for most of the last year, I've seen a lot more concern expressed about Rashee Rice and his case that seems to still be going.
We never get news on yet.
And now Jordan Addison out of nowhere. I mean, this was always something that was probably coming down the pipe. Is now looking at a court date on July 15th. That does not mean he's going to be convicted. It does not mean he's going to be suspended.
Right.
He may win the case. But does this factor into his dynasty value, or it's solely a redraft thing?
I think it's solely a redraft thing for me.
Does it give you any more hope if he misses time that we get a bounce back season from TJ Hawkinson?
No, for me, Heath, I've never been a TJ Hawkinson guy. I've never liked his tape that much. I've never liked his profile that much for fantasy. I know he's produced at times, but it's not for me. I'm going to say no.
The only thing I would say is he's averaged about 8 targets a game since he joined the Vikings. And in a full PPR league, if you get a tight end averaging 8 targets a game, they're a good tight end.
Yeah, the bar is not that high to be a competent tight end in fantasy football.
Does it change anything with JJ McCarthy? Like, one of the advantages for McCarthy is he has this great offensive system, and he has an elite number 1, an elite number 2, and at least a good tight end. Do you get more worried about McCarthy if he doesn't have Addison for a chunk of the season?
Without a doubt, because I think a lot, when I watched the Vikings back last year, a lot of what they did is take advantage of the way that team schematically tried to defend the Vikings, which is with a ton of cloud coverage over the top of Jefferson, and then Addison's on the backside of a play, running a backside dig or an out. Either way, an isolated route, one-on-one, and he will win that route because he's better than a lot of these cornerback twos. And Darnold would just look off to the left to Jefferson, come back and rip that. That's something that without Addison or with it on the field winning those isolated routes, I mean, they drafted Felton, but I don't think he's ready to be that player yet. He was kind of a surprise pick in the 3rd round type Felton. I think it would be a big disservice for JJ McCarthy, who to me already, Heath, I am very, very skeptical that it's just going to be. I know a lot of fantasy managers have just accepted it's Kevin O'Connell. No matter who he puts in there is great. I am not in that camp. I saw a very raw. I watched a ton of McCarthy because he was in the mix for the Giants. I saw a very raw passer who did not play last year and now is all of a sudden expected to just be good because of the coach in the system.
There have been a couple of very raw passers who did not play their first year who turned out okay,
like,
but it's still a risk.
Mahomes?
What?
Love Mahomes? We're talking about those guys.
I mean, yes.
Yeah, but Mahomes, I would never compare anyone to, specifically JJ
Right.
McCarthy for sure. Love, I thought he was a better natural thrower of the football, but it's a fine example. It's a good example.
It is. I think it's always good to do this with Mahomes. And like Josh Allen did play as a rookie, but he may have been as raw as anybody as a passer.
Oh, yeah.
It's good to remember with Mahomes because it sounds completely foolish to compare any young quarterback to Mahomes. He did fall to the 10th pick in the NFL draft. There were people who thought the Chiefs made a mistake taking him there.
To be fair, he actually started that. I remember this because he was my QB1 before he was even rumored as a first round pick. It's one of my one hits. I have a lot of misses at quarterback. That's my biggest hit. He was actually started as like a 3rd round pick, 2nd round pick. He was only 7-7 at Texas Tech. He didn't win a lot of games there, which I think hurt his profile a little bit.
That makes sense. Let's get to our next news item, and this is one of those that Dan may not think is news at all. But Emeka Egbuka has been the absolute, like, you can't go a day of Bucs OTAs without hearing how good he is. He was a guy that I thought coming in was maybe the most ready wide receiver to play in the NFL coming out of college. But then he went to this place where it seemed like, well, he's not going to get the opportunity to use that readiness. He's going to have to sit and wait. That Tampa Bay is not talking at all like he's going to have to sit and wait. Do you put anything into their positive reports and that we've heard over the last couple weeks?
I mean, not like specifically that he's doing great in camp, because I don't really care about OTA performances, and I think that, again, one of the issues we have with OTAs, and this is even true with training camp, is there's not an equal level of reporting. Some teams have more beat reporters and more services covering the team than others. So it seems like we're getting more buzz out of certain players than others. With that said, I think everything you said is right. He was a player who, when you watched, you're like, this guy's ready to play in the NFL, and this guy's ready to contribute right now. I also feel like his skill set really works well for Baker Mayfield as a quarterback. So I could see him hitting the ground running. I mean, even Jalen McMillan had a lot of success as a rookie who was not at the same level of Egbuka. That's a good system with a great offensive line and a quarterback who's found his role in the NFL, and a really good one. I don't know ultimately I personally am very confused when it comes to the Bucs passing game, Heath, overall. I don't know how to evaluate a player like Godwin coming back from the injury, yet they offered him so much money. New England offered him so much money. So does that mean they think he's healthy, or they're just, it's so desperate on the wide receiver market that you would make that offer to him when guys like Gabe Davis get big deals the year before? I'm also like, Mike Evans is a player who, Heath, like, from a dynasty standpoint, people have just written off, right? And from a redraft standpoint, people feel like from our mock drafts, he's just written it off, but he's always produced, and he was like really good in separation score last year and all the advanced metrics. So I kind of feel like he might be the best value there. So it's kind of very tough for me to figure out this wide receiver group. I'm struggling with it a lot. Let's
put two of these questionably, but news items together. You're in a rookie draft. I still have 3 of them left. So like they're still happening. You're in a rookie draft, and let's say you've got the 8th pick in that rookie draft and you don't have a real strong positional need. And your top 2 players available are RJ Harvey and Egbuka. Which one are you taking?
Egbuka for me. I think when it comes down to it, I'll just always kind of lean toward the wide receiver over the back if I don't have any context putting me.
That hasn't necessarily changed based on recent news for you. No. I've had Egbuka at head since the NFL draft. So I agree with that completely. Same. A couple other guys who, for some people, may be in consideration at that same point of the rookie draft, Colston, Loveland, and Luther Burden, miss all of OTAs due to injuries. Ben Johnson's already commented on really not liking that. And I think for rookie pass catchers, it's exceptionally important for them to get reps so that the OC trusts them. And it's really important that the quarterback has some connection with them. Like Rome Odunze was there all summer last summer and still couldn't get on the same page as Caleb Williams. So does this fact that they've missed OTAs this year give you a little bit of concern for this year? And does it matter at all for Dynasty?
For Dynasty, it doesn't matter at all to me, but for the start of this year in a redraft fashion, it does. It means they could be slower to hit the ground, especially Loveland. This matters for much more than me. It's very difficult to transition to the tight end position from the college to the NFL game. It's why we see so much struggle with a lot of top draft picks at the position, or even some mid-round picks that never make it on the field that get some hype in camp, because there's so much responsibility. I think outside of quarterback, you probably have more responsibility as a tight end than any other position in the NFL. You have to be in the run game and the passing game. You have to know your blocking concepts, you're in the pass blocking, run blocking, and also your receiving concepts. Unless, of course, they just use them as the big slot, like the Mon-Ra St. Brown role. If that's the case, we're all going to be like, this doesn't matter that Loveland missed OTAs. But that seems like a stretch to me right now. I think he's more targeted for a Laporta type role, at least in year one. The hope is that. But to get to that point, he's going to have to play and get in that example, he has to learn all the nuances of playing tight end. So I am a little bit concerned on the Loveland front, less so on the Burden front.
Well, and Loveland has been more expensive in most rookie drafts than Burden. We had a good Rome Odunze question. We'll get to that after our next break, which isn't quite yet. We got a couple of news items left, but after that second break, we've got several questions starred here. So appreciate you guys putting those in. 2 more news items. 2 veteran OTA holdouts, Terry McLaurin and Jonnu Smith, not present. These players at the age, I think both of them 28 or 29, at the age where your dynasty value can be more impacted by concerns over this coming year, because this coming year might be your last good year, or next year might be your last good year. It's a bigger percentage. So are you have any concerns about McLaurin or Smith?
Less concerns about McLaurin, because I look at the situation in Washington and with the rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, and just other caps situation there, I think they'll get a deal done. I think they have the cap space and they have the ability to make that, give him a massive contract. So I think that's fine. The Smith one's interesting to me, looking at Miami's cap situation, kind of how they've played this. I almost wonder if it'll get to the point. I mean, if it gets to the point where he just can't get a deal done and he just plays for Miami, I'm kind of fine with him. But if he gets traded to Pittsburgh, I don't want any piece of Jonnu Smith from a fantasy standpoint, dynasty or redraft. And I think that's a dead zone for him. And I think ultimately for Jonnu, it's like there's really only one scenario where it works out for him in fantasy. It's the scenario of last year playing out again, where Miami's O-line gets injured. I mean, look, they're moving on from Terran Armstead. They're starting a new left tackle. There's a lot of question marks on that O-line.
Right.
They get injured again, and they're forced to kind of just use that gimmicky offense that runs through Smith.
Yeah, and I'm a little lower than consensus on McLaurin, pretty much always have been. I don't want to count on him matching those touchdowns from last year because nothing else improved. It was just the touchdowns. So last item, and I know this one has moved me just a little bit, but it was just to reevaluate my projections for this year, which had kind of had me more down on Garrett Wilson maybe than I should have been. Fields and Wilson played together at Ohio State. All reports are Garrett Wilson, based on OTAs, might have 200 targets this year because he's the only person Justin Fields wants to throw to. And it was just a good reminder for me of the connection those guys have, and the fact that Josh Reynolds is currently the leading candidate to be the wide receiver too on the Jets. There's definitely been a dip in Wilson's value over the last 12 months. Is it a good time to buy Garrett Wilson?
It's a tough one for me, Heath, because I think like when you think about stuff like this, it's like, oh, it's camp, and he just keeps targeting Wilson over and over. He could have 200 targets. He could have 170 targets. The only way he's going to have those numbers of targets and that kind of volume is if Justin Fields is running an operational and quite frankly, a very healthy passing game. There needs to be a lot of plays. There needs to be a lot of possessions that don't end in punts. That seems to have been a case for Justin Fields a lot. There needs to be a lot of plays that don't break down with Justin Fields just running, or design runs for Justin Fields. I don't necessarily buy into that being the case for reasons you said. One, the O-line has some talent, still kind of working together, trying to get together. Wasn't great last year. Two, new offensive scheme. Three, no talent at wide receiver outside of Garrett Wilson, which again could lead to more volume, but not if the passing game isn't moving the football. So ultimately, I feel like Garrett Wilson, I look at him in our redrafts, Heath, and then in Dynasty. In Dynasty, you can't really, you're not trading for him at a massive discount. And I don't think if you have him, you're getting that much back for him as you would think based on like, oh, is he going to get 200 targets? And in redraft, his hasn't fallen enough to a point to me where I love him. So I'm not in on Wilson this year. And he's somebody I've been in on in the past, mostly because I thought he would get the Rodgers Devontae treatment. But I don't trust Fields the way I trust Rodgers, and that could be wrong, to operate a functional passing game that's high volume.
Yeah, the high volume part, I think, is the key. If you look at their metrics last year, I think you could make the argument Justin Fields was a better passer in his short opportunity than Aaron Rodgers was. But that's because of Aaron Rodgers has fallen off, not because Justin Fields has taken a big step forward. Let's take our second break, and then we'll get to some of your questions from the chat.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
We have a few questions from the chat, one of them relevant to what we just talked to. Are you buying Odunze? There's been not just Burden and Loveland missing OTAs, but at least some chatter, maybe a little more, about there's a little disconnect maybe between Ben Johnson and DJ Moore. And DJ Moore doesn't exactly know what his role is going to be in the offense, and Johnson may not be Moore's biggest fan. Is there an opportunity for a JSN type breakout from Rome Odunze this year?
JSN, I don't know. It's totally different type of prospects. Like Rome Odunze won in college with outside contested catches. He was able to do a little bit of everything, but he wasn't really like that timing-based route running, route you.
Well, Caleb Williams hasn't exactly been the timing-based quarterback either, I guess, too. Right. So less stylistically, I mean, and more point production.
I don't know if it's that ceiling is possible, but I do think there's a ceiling that maybe just below it, a tier below it, that I am in on. And Rome's been one of my favorite buys this offseason in Dynasty. He's somebody who you can get a little cheaper than where you were getting him at. Not much, but a little cheaper than where you're getting him at last year, which was like, 104, 105, basically. That type of value. And it's somebody I believe in the talent, and I still want to believe in Caleb Williams. I will see what happens this year, though, Heath. If it's another year like last year, I have to just come to reality at some point that he's not the play. Because this is the problem with Dynasty and with quarterbacks, Heath. For Trevor Lawrence, I was buying every single time, each offseason,
right,
assuming like I see the talent, I know he can get there, and he just hasn't gotten there.
Right.
So, and then eventually that asset becomes worth so much less to you, and all the assets around him that you were buying at receiver in Jacksonville became worth so much less. So I don't want that same thing to happen, since I'm heavily mortgaged on these Chicago Bears players and Caleb himself.
No, I think buying Odunze right now at the right price is a good idea. He's currently my wide receiver 17 in Dynasty. I've got him actually just ahead of Garrett Wilson, which makes me one of the low guys on Wilson, right behind T. Higgins, just ahead of the Chiefs wide receivers, though I'd say whichever one of the Chiefs wide receivers actually is the number one this year will move ahead of him. I just don't know which one it's going to be. So yeah, Odunze in that mid wide receiver 2 role. I think it's tough to choose for me between him and Tedero McMillan, but I know some people prefer McMillan.
Can I get
Yeah.
Can I get a quick Chiefs question with you?
Yeah.
All right, last year, I was looking back on a lot of the work we did, trying to like figure out some offseason plans so far. Bold predictions, some of the just stuff me and you did. We were both insanely high on Mahomes from a fantasy standpoint last year. I thought he was going over 5,000. I loved him. I didn't like what I saw from Mahomes as a passer on tape last year, and I'm wondering if like this is what I get now out of Mahomes. But outside of that, if he can get back to like the Mahomes I know he can be, this is the best. This is the best. This has to be the best skill position group he's had since the Hill years, right? Like if Rice is not suspended for that many games, Worthy in year 2, right? Like all of this talent around him, can it just be a year late on Mahomes? Like, can we buy back in? Can I take him again in my Superflex auctions and go crazy on him again?
The great thing is you don't have to. He's now QB6 at best in every draft. Sometimes he falls behind Baker Mayfield to QB7.
Yeah.
Like the risk has mostly been taken away. And what I would say is I don't know that we'll be able to predict which year, but I think he has probably multiple top 2 fantasy seasons in the future.
Okay. You still believe?
I still believe. I know the advanced metrics weren't good and the tape wasn't as good last year. I just don't believe that he forgot how to play the position. I think it's possible. And I think the fact that Travis Kelce's spent the summer down here in South Florida working out with his old trainer and lost 30 pounds kind of indicates maybe the same type of thing. It's hard to go to the AFC Championship 5 years in a row and go to the Super Bowl 3 years in a row and keep putting in the same work and the same level of focus. And I think it's possible that was just a down year in that regard. And now but the question I have is, does there need to be a Super Bowl hangover this year and a bad year, or can you be motivated by losing by losing the Super Bowl? Like most teams lose the Super Bowl and it's the best year they've had in 10 years. Is that enough to motivate you? So I'm a little bit lukewarm, I guess, on Mahomes, but I do think anybody who doesn't believe he still has the 30 point per game potential is wrong. And he does have the weapons around him to do that. They may need some injuries on the defensive side of the ball, so they have
that's my thing. It's less the motivation. It's more like I've seen the drop in fantasy production correlate with the huge jump the Chiefs have made as a defensive football team from the roster, like who they've drafted and how they've developed them. Spags is just unbelievable.
Right.
And then just watching Reed, like so conservative in these games with the running, with the taking field goals on 4th and 2s. Like it's the context that kills me with Mahomes.
We got another question based on some of our earlier topics. Nick Chubb or Ray Davis? I can only keep one.
Depends on what type of team you are, right? If you're win now mode, I think I'd rather Chubb. If I'm trying to think of this long term and my team is in that like 6th to 8th standings range, I'm keeping Ray Davis over Chubb.
I would keep Davis no matter what.
Okay.
But I think there maybe like there are probably people who agree with you. I said it earlier in the show. I'm more skeptical of Nick Chubb becoming what he was, and we've got a potential holdout situation with James Cook. So I'd rather hold on to Ray Davis for now. Steve asked the question that comes up often on the Dynasty show, and I don't know if we've addressed it lately. So how do you handle tanking in Dynasty? We just added a rule that if you score less than 40 points if you score, I guess, 40 or more below the median, you have to pay $10. Any suggestions? And I'll just say, I'll answer the second question first.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love that rule. Like you got to pay if you want to tank, and less teams would do it, but you still have the option to do it and guarantee yourself the number 1 pick if it's worth it to you. And I love that idea of trying to make sure you stay close enough to the median while still losing. It's kind of a fun thing too. My general philosophy, Dan, we've talked about this before, let them tank.
Yes.
I don't have any problem with somebody losing on purpose. I think we see teams in the NFL do it. I think Dan's favorite team would have been better off if they'd have tried that 3 or 4 years ago.
Thank God.
And so I let them tank is my philosophy. But if it bothers people in your leagues, I think this $10 per terrible score might be worth it.
I'll say this. I'm typically with you though, I do like I like Azer's rule, or maybe this is inherited from you in Big Burger, which is like you have to put somebody in your lineup who's on an active roster. You can't just have like somebody who's not on an active roster. I do like that rule if you were looking for something. But I'll say this, I'm with Heath for the most part, because I've now done I've really ramped up my dynasty over the last 2-3 years, Heath. And there's teams where I have tanked because that's the move I've had to make. And it is really hard to dig yourself out of a hole. When you get to that point, you think you're getting all these picks, you're trading for all these picks. A lot of these teams are now 2-3 years later. I got like Caleb Williams, and I have like Genty, I have Bijan on some of these. It's not getting better that fast. And like some of these feel really far away when I look at other teams in the league. I've gotten to the point, Heath, where like as I play Dynasty moving forward and I start my redrafts, I'm going to be very, very vet heavy moving forward. And I know it doesn't always work, like you're saying in Bake Burger. And I've seen it play out with you. You've had to kind of trade away a lot of those vets, but I just think the picks are very overrated in Dynasty. That's my general take right now. Playing a lot more Dynasty, the draft picks are very overrated in trades.
I had a run in YOLO that is for me about as perfect as it gets. I was in the championship game 5 years ago. I lost. I looked at my team. I said, this team's too old. I'm going to tank, and maybe did it a year too early, according to some people. I had 2 terrible years.
And you got it back.
The year 4, I'm in the championship and lose.
Okay.
Year 5, I win the championship.
So you did get it back fast there.
Right. It was I think 2 years is about perfect. But the other thing is, the more tank resistant you are, the longer you wait to take, the longer it takes to get back.
Okay.
If you pull
Take
that
your medicine
trigger
early.
and you might like everybody has a different tolerance for just paying that $50 for the year and trying to lose for a year and just hating life. And I think also the tanking process, you can be really active during that period of making sure that every backup running back is rostered. And every time they get a chance to start, trying to pick up another second-round pick, and just churning like that in super flex leagues, making sure some of these backup, like making sure Joe Flacco was rostered behind Anthony Richardson, and then just waiting for him to get an opportunity and then trying to turn that into picks. Like, I do think that it's not just like your only responsibility is make sure I don't score points or win games. You can have a very active experience while you're going through the tank. And if your league doesn't like it, then don't do it. But I like that $10 per rule. G asks, would you rather have Aaron Jones or Jalen Royals as a contender in a super flex PPR league?
Jones for me as a contender.
Jones for sure as a contender. I'll just check because I have to go to a different tab.
He is loaded at backs though with Genty, Bucky, Achane, and Cook. Like Jones, theoretically, probably it's hard for me to imagine him playing that much on this team, but I also think Royals could end up being a total somebody who's just cut in Dynasty in a year or two.
We've got one more question that we'll get to from Dan. I have a stacked team in a 10-team league. Should I trade Jalen Hurts for Mahomes and an additional pick? And an additional player? And I guess how good would the additional player have to be? Now you're talking here to Dan, who is probably the biggest Jalen Hurts skeptic. Everybody was Jalen Hurts skeptic 4 years ago. Some people still are. I think Dan might still be one of those. And Dan, who loves Patrick Mahomes almost as much as I do.
Yes.
So what would you even need another player to go from Jalen Hurts to Patrick Mahomes?
So just to be clear, I'm a Jalen Hurts skeptic when it comes to real quarterback play, not fantasy.
Right. You're not sure that he could ever get to a Super Bowl or win one.
No, I know he can win a Super Bowl with the most stacked roster in the league by far, like literally across the board, almost a perfect roster. I think a lot of people could, but I'm just a skeptic of him being in the elite tier of Josh Allen, Mahomes, those types of quarterbacks. But as far as fantasy goes, he's clearly in the elite tier. And I'm more skeptical that Mahomes is in that Jalen Hurts tier from a fantasy standpoint. I know we talked about it earlier. We both kind of believe in him. But again, to me, it's the problem of the Chiefs defense being too good and Andy Reid being too conservative. But I think his game will age a lot better than Hurts' game. That's the thing from a dynasty standpoint. Like when Hurts doesn't run the way he's running now, what is left? A guy who threw for 2,900 yards and 15 TDs last year. Does he ever have the ability to become a rhythmic passer as he gets older? I don't personally believe he will be, but I think Mahomes' game could age. Mahomes wins with his mind, Mahomes wins with his arm, and he does win a lot out of structure as well, but that's not his whole game. So from a long-term standpoint, I would do this trade. I think, I was wrong a few years ago, Heath. Like I did like 3 auction startups, or just like I'm paying whatever for Mahomes, and I just paid the most. And he used to be the most expensive dynasty quarterback. It hasn't aged well for Mahomes, but long term, I still feel like he'll play longer. He'll be more effective longer. So if you're looking long term, I like Mahomes.
Yeah, what I would say is, you say you have a stacked team, so it's probably win now. I don't think we don't like Mahomes as much as Hurts, although we both agree he could be better.
He could at any point go back to Mahomes.
This brings up a good point that we talk about all the time, the 2-for-1 deal. You've really got to get something extra if you're giving up the best player in the deal.
True.
That gets even more true in 10-team leagues. I'm much more willing to trade for depth in a 14-team league. It might be that if you go look at my trade chart over on Sportsline, that you see the difference between Hurts and Mahomes is only 3 points on the trade chart. And you go look at the players that are 3 to 5 points, and it's a lot of guys that might not ever matter in a 10-team league.
Right.
So you might not really be getting that much in addition to him. So I'd be less likely to downgrade and add another player. If you think, like Dan and I both do, that Mahomes is probably going to be better for longer, and you want to bet on Mahomes having that bounce back year this year, then I think it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that trade. I have Daniels, Jackson, Allen in one tier in Dynasty, then Burrow, Hurts, Mahomes in the next tier in Dynasty. So they're in the same tier for me. I don't really care that much, but I do think, just as a general rule, taking 2 players for 1 player is even worse in 10-team leagues than it is in 12-team leagues. That's going to do it for your questions. That's going to do it for Tuesday's FFT Dynasty. Dan, thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and get your opinions. Thank you, Claire, for making everything work. Very active chat today. Thanks to Dave and everybody else in the chat for making that happen. We will talk to you on Friday.